Hello, my name is Christopher Flanagan. I'm the Superintendent of Police here in Radnor Township. Welcome to another episode of Police Matters. We have a very important topic to cover today, and I have two subject matter experts from the Township. I'd like to introduce my guests. I have Township Engineer Stephen Norcini and Lieutenant Shawn Dietrich. Today, we're talking about flood safety awareness, and what we do as a township. And the main goal here is to try and keep you as safe as possible and give you high quality information that if you do get yourself impacted by a flood, whether it's flooding at your house or you're traversing the township, that you know how to handle yourself safely. Also, to make sure that our residents know of all the things we have to notify you about floods and our team that would help rescue you if you did have something. I'm going to start off with you, Mr. Norcini. Floods sometimes happen instantly, a sudden downpour. But also there's times we have a lot of time to plan. Could you tell me some of the things that the township does if we have time to plan for a flood, or we know there's a major rainstorm coming?
Well, Chief, the township manager is very proactive when it comes to these types of disasters where we know they're coming. My colleague from Public Works couldn't be here today, but I'll draw back on my time with Public Works for what we used to do and do currently. So when we know a large storm event is coming, immediately inlets are cleaned, inlet tops are cleaned. Everybody is out doing that. Trucks are loaded with barricades. Trucks are loaded with fuel and generators in case traffic signals, if we lose power and traffic signals go out, we can power those traffic signals. We have a tree contractor who will be on call or actually be at our facility if we know it's going to be a really bad storm. The township manager will have meetings prior to with all the departments that are involved with this, whether it be Public Works, Police, Engineering, Community Development, Finance, Public Information. Everybody will be there. Everybody knows the game plan, and everybody is aware of what everybody is doing. So when there's time, there is a lot of planning that goes into these things.
And Mr. Norcini, if an inlet, and that's the grate in the street that takes water in, just in case our residents don't know what it is. But let's say we saw something blocked or people are really paying attention. Can we call in advance and see if we can get somebody to come out and look at it?
Absolutely. So you would call the township at 610-688-5600, extension 155 is the Public Works Department. And there's one thing I would like to add to that. So our men and women are very diligent and go around and clean these tops. Once the rain events start, the tops start clogging again immediately as it washes down the street and all the leaves and debris. So it's a never-ending task throughout the storm. So it's not that they just clean it once. They have to continually clean it, which they do throughout the storm.
Very good. Lieutenant Dietrich, if we have a chance at the police department to know a storm is coming, what action or what steps are taken by the PD?
A lot like what Mr. Norcini is talking about, we do our preparation with the direction of the township manager, and that includes making sure we have a lot of portable generators. We make sure they're up and running and full of fuel. We also make sure we have barricades to put out, because sometimes the Public Works people actually get extended, and we can go out there and put up barricades, make sure you have plenty of yellow tape to cordon off roads, and extra signage to place out as well. The other thing we can do, we can talk about this more, is we have the emergency resident parking. People can come in. They can't do it at the time, but before a storm hits, they can certainly register for that program.
Since you brought that up about the emergency resident parking, is that what this is for?
That is correct. That's a hang tag. If you live any street in the township, if you're concerned about flooding on your street or where you would normally park, you can come to the township with a copy of your vehicle registration, register your vehicle, and you'll be given one of these hang tags. The hang tags are laminated, they're high quality, and you just keep them. And if we declare an emergency in the township, you can then park in any township parking lot as long as you have that tag on and for the duration of the emergency.
This was a pretty, what I consider a great project for the residents and business owners, that the commissioners and the township manager wanted to give them every opportunity to protect their vehicles and have a chance to advance. There's no charge for this, is that correct?
That is correct. This is a free program.
This is a free program to our residents and our business owners, and we're always able to talk about this on the phone. So please take advantage of our emergency resident parking system. One of the things that we're always keenly concerned about, and we've had young children injured near swollen streams, and we also have a problem with cars driving in the water. And there's a saying and I'll start with you, Lieutenant Dietrich. When flooded, turn around, don't drown. What does that mean, and what's the problem?
People enter the water. Sometimes they're just, a storm can hit and it's unpredictable when it hits. They're not expecting it, or they don't know the weather forecast, whatever the situation may be. They'll come to standing water. The problem, even our officers sometimes have misjudged. People that drive 100,000 miles a year will drive through water that's standing, not realizing how deep it is and the force of it, and if there's any kind of cross current. Turn around, don't drown is all about, if you see standing water, turn around, it's not worth going in. Moreover, if there's any other signage or you see yellow tape blocking the road, there's barricades up. Every time we have one of these storms, people seem to drive around and put themselves, but the rescue, the first responders in danger. They should not. They should respect those. Understand that there's a great amount of force in that water. It can damage a vehicle. It can take a life. Don't drive around the barricades. Respect the barricades. Respect the signs.
So I think that's very important. And that turnaround, don't drown is a critical message to our residents, because we do have a lot of people violating our request not to go in. We can't put a police officer or a public works person or a fire truck at every location, so we do put up barricades and yellow tape as soon as we're notified of something, but we actually really need to make sure that you observe those for safety. Mr. Norcini, could you just tell us about what happens with some of our local creeks, streams, whatever, and how it could be normal one day but be very dangerous to somebody the next day?
So, Chief, you bring up a really good point, and if I could just add to what we were talking about, one of the reasons the township brings in a tree contractor is so as trees fall down during a huge storm, Radnor Township is able to open streets very quickly because we have professionals there to do it. But along the lines of the yellow tape, if there's a tree down in wires, people should not go anywhere near it. They shouldn't cross under it. They shouldn't cross over it or around it. I've witnessed it. I know you have. So just want our folks to know, when you see that tree down and that tape up, they should stay away. To your other question, so in weather, in engineering, we talk about the intensity, duration, and frequency of a storm. So the intensity is just that, how many inches per hour you get. So if the news says we're going to get an inch of rain over the next 3 days, that may not be as critical as if when we're going to get an inch of rain in an hour or a half an hour. And those are typically when we've had some of our worst flooding events in the township, when we get a huge amount of rain, very intense, even just for a short period of time. The streams rise up, they come out of their banks, they flood roads, they flood properties. And August 13th of 2018 was a very good example of that.
It definitely was, and thank you for bringing up about the tree and wires. Residents should know that even if a tree's down and you don't see wires, you should actually believe that there's wires in there until proven otherwise. Please call 911. Let our guys get out there. We have great teamwork. The Radnor Fire Company, the Bryn Mawr Fire Company, the Broomall Fire Company, who service us with volunteers, they respond to many, many emergencies, and they do the same prep work and are advised of all of our capabilities that we have. One of the things that the township manager had us work on as a team is we brought all of our department heads together, and we came up with a flood safety awareness bulletin. So as you're watching this program, I want to let you know that we'll be putting it on the television, and a township mailer is going out with all of the items that Lieutenant Dietrich and Mr. Norcini are talking about, so that we can better help you prepare for flooding emergencies. And it covers the turnaround, don't drown, trees. There's a very important PICO message. We even have food safety awareness. We talk about our permit, and we have a flood zone map that kind of shows you where you flood, although most residents really know what's going on in the township. It's good for new residents to have that type of information. If we have a major storm, and it could be snow, it could be water, but we're definitely talking about water. Lieutenant Dietrich, could you tell me what happens when the manager or the commissioners ask us to open the Emergency Operations Center, and what changes?
So we have all the equipment we have an emergency operations coordinator, an EOC. That individual then set up the emergency operations center. And for a lack of a better term, it's sort of a fusion center. We're going to have somebody from Public Works, some administrative support, and some other stakeholders. And what this does is allows us to interact very easily with each other. So if we need a road closed, or we need a barricade, the person in there can simply turn to the person to the right, say, I need a barricade, and it gets done instantaneously. We also do some scheduling changes to make that work. And sometimes this also opens up additional resources to the county. If there's any kind of damage that's done, this helps out the residents sometimes recoup any kind of costs associated with a storm.
Sometimes storms go for long duration, and it's not just the immediate part of the storm. But could you tell us like how we try and recover from one of these bigger storms, and what happens, and some of the things that residents should know what we do to try and mitigate what's happened?
Sure. And again, to speak for my colleague in Public Works, so after the storm is done and the floodwaters and the waters have receded, there's still a lot of work to be done. Again, you might see the men out cleaning inlets. They might be maintaining those generators at the traffic signals that are still without power. And you'll also see them addressing trees along with a contractor. Sometimes we get calls from folks that say, boy, this tree has been down across my street for 3 days. What the heck's going on? And that's one of those trees that's in the wire. So our Public Works, nobody in the township is qualified to cut high power electrical lines that are under a tree. So we have to wait for PICO to come out and do their work. And then our folks can go in and clear the tree. But there is a lot of work that is done. There's cleaning of the streets, the inlets, the trees, going back through their equipment. From the engineering standpoint, that's when there's a lot of folks that historically have not had issues with runoff on their property, and there may be a certain storm where they do get that. And my department will get the calls, and myself or Doug Meter will go out and meet with these folks and see if this is an issue the township can address, or it's more on their property. But there is, so if a storm lasts 3 days, the aftermath is many days from a township standpoint.
If I may, Chief. After the floodwaters recede, we do have, just like Mr. Norcini says, we have trees down all over the place, and we still have the road closed signs up, and we'll actually firm those up a little bit more. But people may look down the street and it looks like it's open. They want to drive around. They don't realize there's a tree leaning about to fall on the street. It may be resting on wires. There may be a fire up there where there's arcing between the wire and the tree, and the fire department cannot address it until the electricity is cut and that is all made safe. And sometimes that takes a substantial amount of time. And when people drive around them, these barricades, they're putting themselves at great risk and putting us at great risk. And moreover, it is a citable offense, and we do cite for that. We're not trying to be mean, but they're imperiling themselves and the first responders when they do this.
So, Mr. Norcini, I think it's very important for our residents and business owners to know that it is a little bit of time to clean up after the flood, but I would say that our Public Works group is second to none, and are 24/7 really attempting to get everything almost like it never happened before. And thank you for pointing that out. As we continue to talk about the floodwater safety, and we've mentioned some of the things that we do in planning and preparation under the authority of Bob Zinkowski, our manager, and the commissioners, there's some responsibility at home, and that is to create a plan. The mailer that you are going to receive shortly goes over having a communication plan, an emergency kit, signing up for our free notifications. And these are the type of things that we need to do before a storm hits, whatever type of storm. Lieutenant, could you just talk to the residents about what are the opportunities with our communication system? What kind of information can they find out through Radnor Township?
Well, if you go to our website, just Google Radnor, you can actually register for a variety of alerts. That includes crime alerts, that includes emergency alerts such as this. We do push some weather alerts out there. Make sure that the people will get if there's a pending storm coming, it will alert you. But these alerts are important, and it helps you prepare your family in case something does happen. And that can be something as simple as just getting your car off a street that normally floods. They'll get an alert that the storm's coming and maybe they should move their car. But that's just one example of how these alerts can help you.
Mr. Norcini, does the Engineering or Public Works Department put out information on this type of event?
So all departments regularly put out information, whether it be road closures for utilities, and absolutely, as the lieutenant had noted. So I just want to let folks know, if your road's been closed because there's been a tree down for 3 days, that's because it's in the wires and PICO is inundated, and we have to wait for them because the township moves very quickly. I agree with you. The Township Public Works folks are second to none. Add that with a quality tree contractor we bring in, so we're the term all over it during and after the storm. So if there is that street that's blocked a long time, that's what we're waiting for. But yes, to answer your question, regularly updates will go out on what streets are closed. There's a tree in the wires. There's a little explanation with that. And folks do call us asking for when will it be fixed. We get the same information from PICO that they do, and then it's their estimated time of arrival. But we do put things out throughout the storm and afterwards.
One of the things that we do is when the EOC works together and coordinates all that information is roads are one of our top priorities getting open, because we realize it can affect people in so many ways. But sometimes when that long-term tree is down, I believe it was just under 3 to 4 years ago where Route 320 Sproul Road was closed, and it was kind of like a devastating hit to us. It's a major thoroughfare. One of the things that I did want to stress in there is if you do know something is dangerous like that or a major complication, the reason the township is not open is Mr. Norcini said we can't, but it's a safety issue. You do not want to go up into that area. You do not want to work. Anywhere you kind of, I'll call it a disaster or a major hazard, we want to have you guys keep away from that area. If you ever have a question, you can always use the 911 system or our township phone lines to get answers. And we want to let you know that we strive very hard to communicate with everybody during these times, and they can be stressful, they can be upsetting, frustrating, but we want to make sure that you remain safe, because pretty much no appointment, no work schedule, anything is more important than your family's safety, your health and well-being. I wanted to just give a little bit of perspective to the dangers of flooding, but 12 inches of fast water can lift a small car. Gas tank, tires, other things make a vehicle buoyant. What really made me nervous, and we talked about with the streams, is 6 to 8 inches of fast-moving water can knock over a small person and sweep them away. And we actually have had a couple incidents where that, and people were critically injured. And 18 to 24 inches can actually take an SUV away. If your vehicle is not made to go through water like that, even if you have a big truck, and I do really want to stress that as far as safety while operating on the roads. With the plan, you want to have everybody understand the plan, not just one person from the resident. And this actually goes over that, and there'll be a link on our website that will give you this information in case some reason it doesn't come to you in the mail. We expect the residents from the time of this show actually should have it, or within the week of this show airing for Radnor Township. When the police department went out just a year ago, the date that Mr. Norcini went over, we realized we needed to make a change in the equipment we carried, because we really were challenged with some water rescues and some other things. And with the commissioners and Mr. Zinkowski supporting any type of thing that makes us more prepared, what was the answer to our training and equipment for flooding? What's different now about the Radnor Police and the Radnor Public Works?
Prior, it's August 13th, I was actually working that day. Prior to that day, we carried no any kind of rescue gear. We really relied on the fire department, which is they go out in a truck. It's very thin. Now we after that event, we actually had dozens upon dozens of water rescues that day. Some of them were as minor, just walking up and opening the door and getting somebody out of what they thought was higher water than it was. But some of them were pretty sophisticated. They were in water, was actually going up over the hood of the car, actually really submerged vehicles, and people could not get out of their car with the force of the water, and the cars were. So I was actually in some of that water and developed a very healthy respect for how much it can start pulling you and things of that nature. Your direction, we ended up trying to get water safety training, and we got equipment. Every patrol car, every unmarked car, including your car, actually now carries 2 life vests, a throw bag, which is a rope, and a circular buoy that we can throw out to somebody if they're in danger, or if the officer feels like he needs to get out, or he or she needs to get out to the car and get the person out for safety, they can actually don a vest, take a vest with them, get the other person set up with another officer with the rope, and then pull everybody back in. So, and it was very well received by the officers. Secondly, in conjunction with that equipment, we put everybody through the Pennsylvania Water Safety course put on by the Department of Environmental Protection, which was a great training tool. And again, that was as much just to develop an appreciation for how dangerous water can truly be, and how to try to mitigate some of those some of the dangers that we face when we knowingly subject ourselves to the risk of going into it.
getting that key equipment. Mr. Norcini, when we have a major event, it's not just the public works guys that come in and the PD and the fire department, actually some other people who help keep us up and running. Could you tell us how our mechanics operate? Because I think that's interesting for the audience to know what we do.
Our mechanics are absolutely the best. And again, speaking for my colleague who couldn't be here, they are in here just like everybody else for the whole storm. They keep everything running, and don't be surprised if you don't see them out on the street, because whether it be a snowstorm or a rain event, if they're needed, they're pulled out and they chip in just like everybody else. But also, on the other side of that, on the downtime, when everybody else is starting to have the downtime at the end of the storm, that's when they're in their highest mode, as they have to repair everything that's been beat up by whatever actions have been taken throughout a storm.
So the fleet, whether it be police or public works, takes a pretty significant beating during these events. Is that correct?
And the fleet is huge. Between the police and public works, there's dozens and dozens of vehicles and pieces of equipment that a three-man team have to keep going.
That's something that I always found, really interesting, that we had mechanics come in when I first started here that keep our emergency vehicles up and running. We have a couple of heavy-duty vehicles. Could you just tell us one or two of the vehicles that really get used in a storm a lot that are?
So our front-end loaders always get used because they're there to remove tree limbs that are cut, or tree trunks, I should say. So the front-end loaders, the dump trucks, and then the pickup trucks that are carrying our guys around who are out scrambling, keeping inlets open, barricading roads, working with PD. So all the trucks, everything's in use.
When we say, Lieutenant Dietrich, when we say we put a generator at a traffic light, could you let everybody know about that program? Because I'm really proud of the way we're able to manage traffic lights when power's out.
So we have some small portable generators, and when a traffic light goes out, especially at a significant intersection during a storm, let's say 30 and 320, there's 5 points that come in together, or six rows that come in together there. If it goes out, we can actually take a generator down. Every one of our lights has a way to plug in a generator that can power that light, power the cycles, and makes traversing those intersections far more safer than even trying to have a police officer direct at that location. And it frees up the police then to go and answer calls.
Okay. That's actually very informative, and I'll just tell a great story to the audience. We had the emergency operations center for a big winter storm, and it was really getting bad. And the township manager, Bob Zinkowski, a couple of commissioners were there, and we found 5 generators available. And they said, without hesitation, get a police car up there as soon as you can. And we're able to get several generators and keep the township up and running. When those traffic lights go down, there is a huge chance of a car accident, and it makes things unsafe. It also slows people traversing just for regular reasons. So having that and that investment by Radnor Township, I think, is really a great thing. Another reason this is a great town and a great place to work and live. We do work a lot with PICO. Is that correct, Mr. Norcini?
That is correct.
So what happens kind of with PICO, and how do we do things a little differently when a storm comes as opposed to a regular day?
So PICO constantly puts information out to the public and to everybody else before and after a storm. So our residents, usually they'll call PICO, but they also call the township to try to get information. Now, obviously, we don't have the information the township does, but the township manager, Bob Zinkowski, he is often able to get some information from PICO concerning very specific to Radnor Township. So as opposed to X thousands of people are out of power in the 5-county area, he can get the information for Radnor Township. And that allows us to plan. We know that certain streets are still closed because of a tree down in the wires, and it may be closed for longer. And then the manager can work with police or whatever department to make sure those folks are taken care of during that time. Their biggest concern, as you know, is being able to get an ambulance to a house on a street that's blocked by a tree that's in the wires.
And there's some tips on how to prepare and make sure you're charging your phone and rotating stuff so that if the power does go out, and we do notify PICO, because if there's a problem in Radnor, it's sometimes safe to say that the problem could be much bigger in scope for PICO, who handles many municipalities. So you want to make sure you follow these guidelines that'll help you lessen the impact of a power outage, be able to have emergency communications. Lieutenant Dietrich, emergency communications and response during these tough times, do you have any concerns for the police, fire, EMS, or public works?
We do like on the August 13th storm that we've mentioned a few times. The system was in a lot of ways overwhelmed. Multiple calls came in to the same location, but we're very fortunate to be dispatched by our county, and they're able to really put the resources on to help us assist with what's the most pressing emergency. And we do communicate. We actually have a channel we can communicate with the public works individuals. So if we can't get to something, we can usually get one of them down there. So the system works real well.
So we even have a direct way to go one-on-one with our people without using cell phones, which I think is a double redundant system that has a battery backup. Mr. Norcini, in the Emergency Operations Center, and you've been in there with us before, and the police are on the street, oftentimes finance joins us and our public information officer joins us. Could you tell me kind of what goes on in there and what information you guys like to push out from engineering, public works, and the police?
So one of the reasons finance and public information is in there, often during these storms there's expenditures that have to be made that aren't normal expenditures. So there could be an emergency. The storm we spoke of last year in August, we had a bridge washout that takes us to one of the meters for our sanitary sewer system. These are big expenses, and South Devon Avenue Bridge the culvert was damaged. We had to work on that, amongst others. So finance is there, aside from all the other duties Bill White, our assistant manager and finance director, has. We are there to speak with him and the township manager, Bob Zinkowski, about expenses that we're incurring that may be over and above what is normal, a payroll and so forth for a storm. And then, again, as we talked about, they're putting out information on roads that are closed, roads that are blocked with trees in the wires. When you see that, that means it's not changing. Roads that are blocked by a tree, that goes on the list, you'll see that in not too long a period of time, that comes off the list because either our guys or the tree contractor we have goes in and does it. Now, at the end of the storm, they just open up the street. So at the end of the storm, there is a lot of time, days to follow. I can remember back several years ago, maybe 6 years ago, where Radnor was the target of these, the cells that would sit over, whereas the town next door maybe got nothing. And there could be weeks of cleanup after a huge storm with all the trees and downed items all along the streets.
Also, in that Emergency Operations Center, it's not uncommon to see Mr. Zinkowski or some of our Radnor commissioners coming through just to stay in touch with what's going on.
Mr. Zinkowski's always in the EOC or on the scene. I've been out with him in some really bad storms. I've never had a manager that would come out with me and witness those things. He's always out there. There's always commissioners that do come by the EOC and see how everybody's doing and get a firsthand look at how well our police department runs that Emergency Operations Center, and it is great.
One of the things that sometimes Mr. Zinkowski authorized the opening of the Township building during certain storms. Obviously, flooding is one of them, and major power outages. Lieutenant Dietrich, what happens when we make that decision? What service do we offer our citizens?
So we've used it for flooding. We've used it for people that have been forced out of their homes. We've also used it in the wintertime when a significant number of people lost electricity. We'll open it up. We get the Red Cross in. They bring in cots, blankets, and can even supply food for them on a temporary basis, just as somewhere to shelter until they can make other arrangements or until the power comes back on.
Excellent. I'd really like to thank you guys for coming. I think it was critical for our citizens to know how we work during flooding, how they can prepare themselves, and most importantly, turn around, don't drown, make a safety plan, follow our awareness tips, and I want to thank the audience for their time.